halfway point. We're going back into the archives for Madonna, and
Yeah.
not since season one when we did the countdown by number order, not year order.
Right,
I
right.
think have we gone back in time to cover an album from an artist out of order. I think because we have done Like a Prayer, which
Yep.
was 89, and this takes us all the way back. I think to is it 85 or 86, Josh?
86.
86 along the way, and
Hmm.
this one was big, dude. This sold tons and tons of copies
Yep.
and had lots and lots of singles.
And
Um,
comes on the, follow up to Like a Virgin, which was a massive,
Correct. Yeah, this is
kind of game changing album in a lot of ways.
this is her third. It's heavily influenced by her recent marriage to Sean Penn.
Okay.
In fact, True Blue is supposed to be about him. There's a lot of stories about that, but
Got it.
yeah. So that's kind of where Madonna's at in her life. This is also like when she's starting to try to become a film star. I think that's the dual mission of Madonna. I always say like Madonna was super successful at being like the biggest female pop star, a little bit less successful in terms of her second goal of being serious actress. And I think part of the whole pop star thing is what got in the way of the serious actress thing. It's kind of like you can't do both, in my opinion, at the same time. But yeah, why don't we just jump right into it, Josh? What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's it's interesting going backwards to have Like a Prayer as a comparison point. This is clearly a an homage in a lot of ways to kind of those retro 60s pop albums, especially like girl group type of Motown type of numbers. There's a lot of it's firmly in the 80s in terms of kind of not only the synths but kind of the instrumentation and kind of the like almost effervescent feel that it has at times. And there's these these horn blasts and synth and kind of percussion that really solidifies it and marks it in a time and place. I'm thinking specifically of something like the track "Open Your Heart," which is a great number. I mean, Madonna was a great pop star for a reason. This album is certainly enjoyable, and we talked about Paula Abdul last week. This album is better than that Paula Abdul album in a lot of ways, but it's also treading the same ground in terms of being accessible and being fun to listen to, and um, you know being sung by a female artist primarily. But I feel like she hasn't, let's see, the highs are pretty high on this album, but I feel like the kind of tracks that I wasn't as familiar with were not as successful. And I think that knowing where she goes with Like a Prayer, that album has a more complexity and kind of creative experimentation that this album doesn't have. Now, I think as a whole, this album works pretty well. You have great numbers on here like Papa Don't Preach, Open Your Heart, Live to Tell. Basically all of the big singles off of it work really well, but the rest of it is kind of, while fun, it's kind of like forgettable after you hear it. I found it a little perplexing that White Heat has, which is that their track has the James Cagney quotes from White Heat the movie, which is like a 30s gangster movie. I just don't know, other than the title, like why she would put that in there. Or like what the point? Maybe she's a big fan of White Heat, the movie.
That was, in my opinion, pretty clearly the weakest song on the album.
Yeah. But it kind of like, I mean, that the tracks like fly by, and there's a bouncy nature to them that makes it appealing. But the singles, this could almost be, the singles are so good on this album, and it seems like there's probably like 5 of them, and you take them out, you could easily put them on like a greatest hits album. So I think she's successful because she has massive hits on it, and those songs are really listenable and re-listenable, and I had a good time enjoying them. I just feel like, does it do? I haven't listened to Like a Virgin in a while, so I can't really think about what the progression is from that album to this album. I think ultimately where she goes with Like a Prayer is more interesting. So I think it's a journey. She's clearly talented as always, and it's still fun to revisit this album because I haven't in a long time. I still think positively of this album. It's just doesn't all work, and she has other albums that work better in my opinion.
That's interesting because I like this one quite a bit. I know that her goal with this one was to go from the Madonna of the first two albums, the self-titled and Like a Virgin.
Yeah.
That were a little bit more tailored, I think, for like a teenage audience or a younger audience, club music, to kind of crossing over to being like a superstar that older folks would listen to. I think that there was some calculation, as there always is with Madonna, about adding in, some Latin sounds,
she does do
classical music sounds, some girl group / Phil Spector / late 50s pop sounds in True Blue, which I think are more familiar sounds, right, than the sounds on the first couple albums, which could be sort of viewed as 80s, dance sounds, or even if you want to go back, like disco type sounds, which for older folks might already have started to be looked at as not their type of music.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I'd look at this one. I think the thing that really stands out to me about Madonna when we cover her albums is she is an extremely good hook writer. And on this album, the songs without hooks or weaker hooks stand out so much because there's so many.
Party would be
where's the party? I look at it as it's a generic song with a good hook. Like that's the hook is about the only thing to me that saves that song, because up until the hook it's nothing, and then you have a very distinct way of singing that song by Madonna that kind of like almost salvages the song along with the backbeat in it. Papa Don't Preach is a really excellent pop song,
and that would be an example of her pushing, I think, her writing a bit more and going into that direction that Prayer Prayer goes into.
Well, remember, Like a Prayer was designed to be her serious album, right? In her mind. So she's not quite at that headspace right here. She's still young, and like I said, the theme on this was, Madonna trying to become a mainstream superstar, not just a niche one. And then, of course, it seems like the marriage with Sean Penn was huge at this. And, in order to become a movie star, right, you got to get like the type of movie star that I think she imagined herself as, right? You got to get everybody to buy your movies. Yep. So, yeah. Open Your Heart is a really great pop song. I've been on the record before. I think Madonna as a ballad singer is almost Madonna at her best. Don't get me wrong, she has a lot of great dance songs, but some of the most memorable Madonna songs for me are her ballads. She just, if you want to criticize the fact that she has a little bit thinner voice in the same... I look at her similar to like Diana Ross, Janet Jackson, other people who kind of get criticized, Britney Spears, right? Like not vocal powerhouses, right? They're as much about the presentation as they are about the pure singing, or the force of their personality, right? That's a knock that she gets sometimes, but I think her singing is a little bit stronger on this album than on the first couple. It's got a little bit more weight. Some of that's production, but also her voice just works really well in ballads. There's an emotional resonance that she gets on her ballads of the 80s, and she'll carry it into the 90s too, because she's doing like Take a Bow and You'll See and Rain and This Used to Be My Playground. Those are all, I think, really profound songs, and we heard it on like Oh Father and Like a Prayer. Get Into the Groove is not truly a ballad, but has her singing in that register as well. So there's so many. But yeah, I think this is a pretty significant step up from the self-titled that we covered. We didn't cover Like a Prayer, Like a Virgin, excuse me. But knowing what I know about that album, having listened to it before, I think this definitely represents a step up from that. I think the highs on Like a Prayer are higher, but I think the consistency on this album is better.
Yeah.
There's less songs. Even we mentioned the one miss already, but even the songs like Jimmy Jimmy and stuff, which I'm not as in love with, there's stuff I can find appealing about them. And
Yeah.
you mentioned, where's the party? It's heading to generic land until she writes a chorus that's sort of undeniable, and then sort of the backbeat kind of sucks you in, and next thing you know, you're
Yeah.
you're grooving along with it. I think La Isla Bonita, if I remember correctly, was originally supposed to be a Michael Jackson song, and
Mm.
then it sort of just he turned it down, and she took it, rewrote the lyrics
Yeah.
into what it is, but kept the sort of the sounds, and you can kind of see it as a Michael Jackson song when you think about it. But
Yeah, and that's a good, that's an example of the incorporation of the Spanish guitar there, and her trying to push into maybe other, sounds that would appeal to an older audience. I think, and that song is very successful in my opinion. I really like that song.
yeah, it's got like other like percussion type
Mm,
instruments in that one too. Yeah, so
yeah,
you're seeing her using the different sounds there and the acoustic guitars, not just the synth and drum that was her earlier
that's true.
albums, and
Yep.
you're also seeing her start to touch on serious issues. The earlier Madonna album did not. I do not believe Like a Virgin has a serious song like that
Yep.
in it. And we saw that Like a Prayer does has several of them. So she's sort of this is the beginning of her as like a provocateur too, because when
Mm-hmm.
your first song's about an abortion, we sometimes forget, right? Like this is
Right.
1986, right? And there's just to be a pop star and to have the lady balls, right? To have one of your lead singles be I think it's the second single on this. Live to Tell came first, second. To have one of your lead singles, you could have played it safe, right? And released True Blue and Open Your Heart, right? Which were a little
Yeah.
bit more. But instead, after the ballot, which was released basically to promote the movie, that's why it was number one, you get, Papa Don't Preach.
Mm.
And maybe in this day and age, when we talk about things like that more in public, it doesn't seem as transformatory, but I have to put myself back in the the time that I'm in, and that's the type of thing that like more off the grid artists did, right? Because they could take more chances, but this is like the biggest female pop star in the world doing that, which you have to ask yourself, like
Yeah.
even today when the space is there aren't a lot of people that are putting themselves out there quite that much. And some people think that just having overly sexualized songs is sort of that risque, but like Madonna could do that if she wanted to too, but she's choosing to be all things. So
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I'm not too in tune with kind of like the modern pop atmosphere, but I don't know many female artists that are writing about abortion, pop songs about abortion. So,
well, no, I mean it's
yeah.
you look at Miley Cyrus has big hits and stuff, and she writes about things like a lot of writing about like mental health and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
but big social issues, they're kind of directed away from doing that.
Yep.
It's or at least don't do it on the album, right? But
Yeah.
really where that has precedent is the country singers in the 70s when the female ones were really taking risks, right? Because they were talking about like the birth control pill and like issues that were considered not in line with country music and certainly ladylike conversation, right? And we've
Yeah.
talked about like Loretta Lynn and Tanya Tucker, right? People like that, even Dolly Parton in her own way being pretty subversive. So
Hmm. Yeah. Good point.
but yeah, this one's pretty strong thumbs up for me. I enjoyed this one again. It's not like if you're looking for like critically acclaimed serious music, this isn't it. But once again, like to me, one of the prime things about the 80s is there's just a lot of really big pop stars making really good mainstream pop. And that is not always the case in popular music. There's a lot of stuff that's popular, but it's not always good.
Right.
And the mid to late 80s is sort of I don't know if there's going to be an era that had the depth and the richness of music that people were consuming at mass that also was really good as music. So, pop music, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder too if that happens, if that can only be appraised kind of retrospectively. Certainly not in the moment. Like I don't know if this decade so far has the depth there. and I don't know about the previous decade, but yeah, that's a good point.
Well, we're going to be covering all of it, so we'll be able to draw a comparison. But we have covered the 60s and 70s and early 80s, and I can tell you I like the pop from this period considerably more than the pop in those eras, by quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so thumbs up for me too. Not as high as the other two Madonna albums that we discussed for me, but still quality.
I would slot this one as slightly my one of the three, with Like a Prayer just behind it, and the debut, while charming, definitely number 3 of 3.